Have you ever heard of cancel culture? I like to think that we have another culture called boundary culture. If you're too tired, set a boundary. If someone asks you to do something, set a boundary. If you don't have the capacity, set a boundary. Now, don't get me wrong. Boundaries are a tool, but what if they are not the only tool? Let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Yvette and I am a certified social and emotional intelligence coach. And on this channel, we talk all things emotional intelligence. And today we are talking about boundaries. Boundaries are everywhere. The topic of boundaries. Protect your peace. Set a boundary. Say no. But what if boundaries shouldn't always be the first response? The first thing I want to do is talk about what a boundary actually is. I think that in our culture, we talk about boundaries so much that people get confused about what they mean. In its practical sense, boundaries are not about other people. They are about you. They are about your own personal limits. Boundaries are statements about what works for a person and what doesn't. Boundaries are statements about what works for a person and what doesn't. The interesting thing though is that they often happen inside of a relationship. Those limits, what works, what doesn't. And so the thing is you have to know yourself, which then introduces us to the skill of emotional intelligence. And so I said on this channel, we talk all things emotional intelligence, and we're going to talk about today how to set a boundary without feeling guilty. But also, I'm going to give you some other things to consider. The first thing I want to do is talk about what emotional intelligence is, because that's the skill we're going to use to set a boundary. Emotional intelligence is one's ability to be aware of their own emotions and the emotions of others, and to use that information to manage themselves and their relationships. Simple, right? Except it's not. The great news is that emotional intelligence is a skill. And I always say on this channel, emotional intelligence is a difference maker. If you want to 180 your life, 10x it, get the life of your dreams, developing your emotional intelligence is going to pay dividends. It is going to produce fruit. And so I highly encourage you to learn more about the skill of emotional intelligence on this channel. That's why we exist. So emotional intelligence is all about being aware of yourself, how you show up, understanding other people, and managing relationships. And so there's a 4-quadrant model that helps to explain emotional intelligence. And so I want to talk about it quickly as it relates to boundaries. So when you think about a boundary, which is a personal statement, a statement about what works for a person and what doesn't, you want to first think about, well, how do I know what works for me? So we have self-awareness. When you're setting a boundary, you have to know your limits. What can I do and what can't I do? What do I have the capacity for and what don't I have the capacity for? What do I value? This might be a surprise one for you. What are your values? Because values play into what boundaries you need to set and what you don't. If you are a person that feels like you like to go above and beyond for people, maybe that's one of your values. So your boundaries might look different from someone that's like, hey, I like equal footing in a relationship. I only can give what you give. Those boundaries are going to look different for that person. So you need to be aware of yourself and know your limits, okay? What works for you and what doesn't. The second thing in setting a boundary and preparing yourself is to manage yourself, right? So once you know your limits, you have to be able to honor and manage those limits. And that means that you may have to have a conversation, which is what we're getting to. Social awareness allows you to consider the other person's perspective. And so when you think about a boundary, it doesn't happen in a bubble. It typically is with another person, and you need to communicate with that person. Either it's at work or it might be in your personal life, but there's another person, there's a relationship that the boundary will have to exist in. So you want to consider the other person's perspective as well, which is what social awareness is all about. Relationship management is how do I communicate the boundary in a way that nurtures the relationship? How do I communicate the boundary in a way that nurtures the relationship? Maybe you've never considered that before, but boundaries should not create distance. It should bring people closer together because you have an opportunity to invite curiosity, dialogue, alignment, and ultimately an agreement. But maybe you've never considered it like that. But again, we're talking it through, okay? So boundaries do not happen in a bubble. They happen within a relationship. And emotional intelligence is going to help you to get there. And I'm going to show you how. So remember, this video is all about how to set boundaries without feeling guilty. Oftentimes people feel guilty because they're not really clear on why they're setting the boundary. They have not considered the other person's perspective. They're unsure sometimes about the relationship, like do they want this relationship, do they not? And so a little bit of where we're headed is going to help you in that department. The first thing that you want to do in setting a boundary without the guilt, leave the guilt at home because there's no reason to feel guilty. This is something that is going to serve you and the other person if you use emotional intelligence to get there. So we want to get clear on our limits, okay? What is working? What is not working? Why it's not working? What are you trying to protect? Is this a real limit? And have you ever communicated it? That's the other thing. People jump to set boundaries, but did you ever communicate to the person that you had this limit? They're not a mind reader, so they may not know, which is why you want to be easy in the conversation. You want to be very careful and compassionate as well, because this is the first time, maybe, that you aren't even communicating this limit. So why this is going to help you with guilt is because it's going to help you to understand why the boundary exists. Why is it needed? Once you understand what's working for you, what's not working for you, what you're trying to protect, is there a real limit, and why, you have information, you have data that you can stand on with confidence, respectfully, you can stand on with confidence because you now understand the why, okay? So we want to first get clear on the limit. Don't just jump to the conversation and telling the person, this is my limit and this is why. It's important for us to advocate for ourselves, but we can also do it in a way that's emotionally intelligent and help us to enrich, make the relationship stronger. Imagine that. So the second step is to check for alignment. Think about, have you talked about this with the person before? Did you have a set expectation and they went against that expectation? Is there any agreements in place? Do you need to get clarity from them, or do you need to offer some clarity? For example, if you have a limit about your ability to spend time with another person, maybe it has to do with your energy, how draining it is for you. Sometimes they may need clarity on why this limit needs to be set. And you might say, I don't need to explain my limits. And I would agree with you, but if you care about the relationship and how you show up as an individual, perhaps maybe a little bit of clarity could be helpful, and it can really help to strengthen the relationship. You want to strengthen your relationships. And so remember, conversation, curiosity, alignment, and agreement. All of those four things should be on the table. Check for alignment. Was there alignment before? And if not, how can you all get alignment when you actually have the conversation? Right now, you have not had the conversation. You're preparing for it. Imagine that, preparing to set a boundary, actually taking some time to be intentional about it. The third and final step, it's time to have the conversation, to communicate and to nurture the relationship, because we can do both. You want to be clear, respectful, watch your tone, leave room for dialogue. You want to start the conversation and set it up, but also you want to listen for their perspective. Ask questions, allow them to ask you questions, and leave room for you all to dialogue and maybe co-create what happens next. You know your limit, and you don't have to necessarily bend on that limit unless you choose to. But if you care about the relationship, you need to hold space for that as well. Two things can be true. You set your limit and you may ask, what can I do given this limit? Or you may ask, this is my limit. How can we make this work for us? The opportunity for you is that you set your limit. The opportunity for them is for them to have a perspective and an opportunity to share their feedback about what you have, about this new change in the relationship. And so it's really important for you to hold space for both. You might have never considered this before because our culture makes it seem like I have a boundary, that's it, that's my boundary. I encourage you, if you care about the relationship, the guilt won't be there if you can honor yourself without disregarding the relationship. The guilt won't be there if you can honor yourself without disregarding the relationship. So boundaries should not be this big to do. They shouldn't be these uncomfortable, hard conversations. They should be another conversation. In fact, if you're having a problem or struggling preparing for this conversation, I would encourage you to maybe look at the communication between you and the other person, because it should not be something that's giving you angst. You should not be anxiety driven about this conversation, because it's an opportunity for you to take care of yourself and also nurture the relationship. A different perspective, I know. On this channel, we always have a 3-day challenge. So in the next 3 days, I encourage you to look for an opportunity to set a boundary. If you need to. So in the next 3 days, I am challenging you to look at the boundaries that you've set. Is there an opportunity to have a follow-up conversation? Now that you have this new skill, developing emotional intelligence and setting boundaries in a way where you have no guilt, but also you nurture the relationship, could you circle the block? Could you have an opportunity to clear up some things, maybe nurture that relationship because you didn't have these skills before? Or maybe there's an opportunity for you to set a boundary that you've been kind of noodling on for some time, and it's time for you to have the conversation, and now you have the skills. 3-day challenge. In the next 3 days, look for an opportunity. If you found this video to be helpful, I would love for you to like, comment, subscribe, share, do all the things. And remember, life does not have to happen to you. You can happen to life. Until next time, take care.